we're a year old, so been in this place trying to get AI to make useful interventions, as Kevin says, that help in public services. We see quite a lot of AI that's out there because it's shiny and wonderful. We are about what problems does this solve and how can it do it? Our giving you a little bit of what we do and why we think what we're doing is a bit unique. Firstly, we build AI tools which are private and secure. That's at the heart of everything that we do. We want to make sure that the data that you're putting into these does not leave them and is not used for training the open models, which some of you may know is what happens unless you lock that down in using AI tools. And access to our tools is restricted. So it's a great position to be able to build tools which you can use pretty safely in your own environment. We specialize in a particular kind of AI. I'm not going to kind of get technical, but that is trained on your own organization's data. So you choose what you'd like it to know, what you would like it to learn, and the incredible power of large language models, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, you might have heard of some of those. It uses that incredible power and technology, but only looking at your data. And now that is what makes it really exciting, because you can start to do things and create use cases as we talk about them in areas that previously were not possible. 80% of organizational data is what they call unstructured data. And really what that means is documents, it's words on pages. And as we all know, we spend a lot of time reading, writing, trying to find stuff in organizations, and AI, the capability of this to be able to look straight into your world and learn about you and your organization and be able to then really help you. That's what we're really excited about. That's the kind of tools that we build. They're safe and secure, as I mentioned, and they don't hallucinate. This is really important. There's a word that gets used in AI land for when AI makes stuff up, and they call it hallucination. That's where it's just inventing things which aren't real. That's because of the way that these things are designed, and the fact that they're trained on the whole internet means that, because I've heard apparently not everything on the internet is true. But the AI tool doesn't know the difference between truth and untruths, let's say. Whereas your data, when it's trained on that, it only looks there. So it's really exciting. We think AI has the power to transform a whole bunch of public services. In education, where we spend a lot of time, it has the power to be a personal tutor to students if that's what you want to do. And I think in some cases that's really useful, not in all, but in some cases. It's got the power to take on the bureaucracy and administration, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with in your sector, but certainly within education, there is, let's say, a significant amount of admin to enable you just to do the job of teaching. We think AI can take a lot of that on. That can help with retention and recruitment of great teachers, keep them in the classroom, and importantly, get them doing what we really want them to be doing, which is spending time with their pupils and students. We were really, really delighted when Johnny and Coram Innovation Incubator asked to work invited us to work with them on their vision, on Johnny's vision, I guess, really for an AI tool for social workers. So we're really pleased to be able to support this with our secure AI engine. I've had a sneak preview of some of the feedback and the ways that this has been helping. And I know Johnny is going to share much more about that now, and I can't wait to hear all about it. We are going to take questions at the end. I know Kevin, myself, and Johnny are prepared for any question that you want to ask. So please put those into the chat as we go, and then we'll make sure we cover as many of those as we can after this. But now for the main event, the part that we're all here to really hear. Johnny, over to you.
Thank you, Kieran, and thank you, Kevin. It's a total pleasure to be here, to be able to talk about our work and the work that we've done together. And I guess probably just to add, actually, working together is the key to this. Engine had a tool, they had a product that they were using, and And through the Coram Innovation Incubator, we were able to come together and talk about how might that translate, how might we be able to test out some of the things that we thought would be useful. We were able to spend time thinking together about some of the considerations that we needed to have. And I guess I'm going to hopefully cover some of those things that we thought about together, some of the things that we thought about internally, and then I will share with you the tool. I will share with you some of the feedback that we've had. So I think to start with, I wanted to highlight a couple of bits. Some people talk about AI and particularly generative AI as being the future, but actually it's the present. It's here now, and people are using AI in their work, in their personal lives. The notion, I mean, you can't buy anything tech related at the moment without it saying that it's got AI. I saw an advert for a fridge that said it had AI so that you know what's going on inside. I mean, who needs to or wants to know what's going on inside their fridge? I guess everybody's hoping the same as I'm hoping that things are relatively calm in there. But AI is everywhere. What we're really keen on here in North Yorkshire is identifying what are the really practical use cases for AI. How can it help us do the best job that we can do? And that is to serve the children, young people, and families that we're here to help and assist. Now, thinking about social work, I spend a lot of time talking about technology and social work, and there's a couple of different concepts. The first is we've got built up in our minds an idea of what a social worker does, and we've built that concept over years. We know that social workers aren't able to spend anywhere near as much time directly with children and families as they'd like to be able to. And we also know that there are kind of technology burdens in our sector. There are things that keep us and prevent us from doing the things that we really need to do to help children and families. So our goal, if you like, is to utilize technology in a way that it should be used. Technology can and could do many things, but what we actually want it to do are the things that specifically it's good at. Let social workers do social work and let technology assist with social work is our primary goal. So this conversation came about where Engine had a product that we thought would be transferable into social work. And so we started to have a conversation about what we've ended up calling the policy buddy. The idea of the policy buddy is that it is almost a virtual assistant. You can ask it questions, and as Kieran said, the only things that it will look at are the things that we've told it to look at. So it will only look at national legislation and North Yorkshire Council policies and procedures. So if I ask it a question, I know that the answer will either come from the national legislation or will come from our local policy and procedure. I guess when we start to talk about how do you use AI effectively, what is it good at, and what are social workers good at, I revert to this topic of if you're looking for a piece of information, so somebody asks you a question and you're not sure what the answer is, what is the first thing that you do? And we asked our testers here in North Yorkshire what they did when they got a question that they didn't know. The top answer was that they asked a colleague. The second top answer was that they asked a manager. And the third answer was that if both of those avenues failed, they would go and try and find the right policy. So that's our current leaderboard. Ask a colleague and hope that they know the answer and hope that they know the most recent or up-to-date answer. Ask a manager and equally hope that they know. Using two people's time, get the answer and trust that person. If those things fail, go and look at the policy. as humans, the thing that we do when we're looking for something is if you find what you think the answer is, you stop looking. So if I go to a particular document and it's given me what I think the right answer is, I then stop looking and might not look at related documents. I might not look at related pieces of legislation. So there's some difficulties in there for us. We had this assumption that most people would go and ask a colleague or a manager. We expected that as a result of that, we might have some vulnerabilities when policies and procedures change because you're relying on people keeping themselves up to date. And we also suspected that if people were looking in the policies and procedures, that they would find the first piece of information and would then stop looking. All of these things have been able to be addressed by use of the policy buddy. So what did we do? We talked to Kieran and Julia and the team at Engine, and we agreed between us that we would create a social work specific policy buddy. We provided a list of national legislation and we provided a very long list of our internal policies and procedures, which the team were able to then train the model against. And so they said, you know, these are the source documents. This is what I want you to look at. And then we, as a really small development team, had a bit of a chance to play with the policy buddy, ask it some questions. And once we did some tweaking in that, we immediately recognized that there were some vulnerabilities in terms of our policies and procedures. Not everything was where we would have wanted it to be. Some people had stored documents, some people had things in different parts of our internal infrastructure. But once we were satisfied that actually we've got a pretty good model here that is looking at the right things that we want it to look at, we then went and recruited almost 50 practitioners from right across children and young people's service. Not just social workers, but practitioners in the Children's Safeguarding Partnership team, practitioners across our early help service, our children's safeguarding service, and some other policy related practitioner posts to make sure that we were getting a range of views. We deliberately targeted the people that were less tech savvy because we wanted to make sure that not only the techies adopted it, but that we were able to get feedback from people who perhaps were a little bit worried or nervous about new technologies, were worried about AI and the potential for AI. What we did was we've been testing the tool now for about, I think, 7 weeks, and we surveyed those 50 people before they started using the tool to ask them about how do you interact with policies and procedures currently, what would you do if you had a question, all those types of things that gave us a benchmark. And the second half of this testing period is going to be spent asking how that's changed. But we held a midpoint review with practitioners so that we could see what their thoughts were, what their hiccups might be, what were some of the barriers to using technology, but also what were the opportunities that people had got and gained. I guess when talking about AI, when talking about new technology, one of the things that I'm always really keen to stress is that as a workforce, as a society, we can have false optimism about the current level of expertise. And I think some of that plays out. We can think, well, this is how it works now, and that works fine. But the reality is that's not necessarily the case. If you ask somebody for directions and they send you the wrong way, you very quickly realize, and that's a really stark reminder that not everything that everybody tells you is true. So when Kieran talks about not everything on the internet's true, equally not everything that people tell you is true and accurate. Some people might tell you the way that a policy directed people to do things up until last year when the policy changed, and that person's not aware of the new policy. Some people might give you advice based on them and their practice area, but for the particular scenario you've got, that might be different or might require a different skill set. What we expected from using the policy buddy was that it would, one, save time from both the practitioner that's using it, but also the person who otherwise would receive the questions. The second element that we expected was that this tool would empower the workforce. Right from the first conversation, I had it in my head, this tool would be really powerful for new members of staff, particularly for newly qualified social workers coming into a landscape that is heavily regulated, that is heavily legislated. I expected right off the bat, actually, this tool will empower those people to get answers to their questions. I always thought that one of the beauties of using something like the policy buddy is you can ask it the same question 10 times and it will never get sick of answering your question. And I remember being a newly qualified social worker and being in those positions of, should I still be asking this question? Do I look like I'm not learning fast enough? And so I always thought this would have a real benefit to those people. But actually, as I've used it and as I've spent time with practitioners, it's got much more benefits to other people. It's got benefits to experienced social workers who can check out their hypotheses, who can check out the things that they're thinking about a situation, who can very quickly ask a piece of information. Can you find me, the right pieces of information to talk about this situation that I'm experiencing? Equally, for those senior leaders in an organisation who maybe have multiple portfolios, the people that look after a children in care team and a leaving care team, those senior leaders in an organisation who are responsible for all aspects of early help or preventative services, this tool is a really safe space to check out the questions about the detail. If I'm responsible and my background is children in care, and I'm now responsible for children in care, leaving care, and unaccompanied asylum seeking young people, I can very quickly find out the detail relating to those decisions that somebody's asking me to make. So I guess one of the unexpected benefits was that it's much more than a tool for new people or newly qualified social workers, but it is absolutely still a tool for those people. So I wondered if Julia would share with us the policy buddy, and I'll spend a little bit of time talking to you about some of the scenarios that we've experienced or had. Now, this is what it looks like. Because it's a test, we wanted to make sure all of the people were able to ask questions of it. We wanted to make sure that people were able to provide us feedback. And so we designed alongside Engine what the front page would look like and the words that would be written on there. Imagine you're a newly qualified social worker. Everything's going well, and you're working in a children's safeguarding team, and you're sat on a sofa talking to a parent, and they ask you, my child's subject to a child protection plan, I want to take them on holiday, what has to happen? That's not a scenario I would have been ready for as a newly qualified social worker. And traditionally, what are the things that we would do? I expect the things that I would have done without being able to access the policy buddy is I would have probably said, I'm not sure, I'm going to go and find out. So the traditional method would see somebody asks me the question. I then say, I don't know. which impacts our relationship, could impact the trust between us. I then go back to the office, talk to a colleague or a manager, which we know are the top two options that people have said to us they would do if they didn't know about something. Find out the answer, or hopefully find out the answer, and then have to either go back and visit the family to give them the answer or telephone them. In that traditional method, there is quite a lot of lost time. There are some effects on our relationship or the trust that's built between me and the family. And meanwhile, what's the thing that actually needs to happen is the parent needs to know, can they take their child on holiday? And I need to know what I can advise them to do. So having access to something like the Policy Buddy, I can pull this up on my telephone. I can pull this up on my computer if I've got my computer there and open, but I can also access it via a mobile device. So in using this Policy Buddy, my scenario might be the mum asks me the question. I say, actually, I'm not sure. Let's check it out. Bring up the Policy Buddy. Ask the question either by typing or by using my voice, because on the mobile version, you can ask using your voice, and then hit the send button, and let's see how it goes. This is where you keep your fingers crossed. It's always when you demo it that it goes slower. So you can see very quickly it's given an answer. It's been away, it's looked at our documents, and it's very clear about what needs to happen. So if I'm unsure about this situation, and any of those situations where things come up that are not common, I've got the power to get the answer to those questions. If I'm not entirely sure where that information's come from, you'll see at the bottom of the answer, it points you to the reference. It says this is where I'm taking this information from. And so it also gives you really quick access to the answer to your question. You can then read a bit more if you've got time, but equally, if you're sat with mum and dad and they're asking you this, you can be reasonably confident. Yes, you can go on holiday. Yes, there are some things that we need to do, but you can do that. Equally, you can go back, you can use this as part of supervision. You could talk about the scenario. How can technology assist practice? I would say exactly like this. It's going and doing the work. It's going and looking at those scenarios. So, Julia, I'm going to give you a slightly more complicated scenario. So, if you could, would you type this in? That you're working with a child who has some complicated needs. They've got an identified disability, and there are some safeguarding concerns about the care that they're receiving from their parents. They're also experiencing some level of domestic abuse in the home. Can you ask what pieces of legislation might be relevant to provide services to this young person? So the reason that I've given this scenario is that as part of our introduction to the Policy Buddy here in North Yorkshire, one of the things that we did was I went to a team day, and as I arrived, the team were there and were spending some time looking at a complicated case study for a young person. Their home situation was tricky, and they also had some additional needs. And they had teams of social workers looking at this, identifying the key factors and identifying the key pieces of legislation that related to the situation. So I thought it would be fun for us to test the policy buddy, put it through its paces, and give it some really complicated situations. When I talked at the start about you could easily look at a situation, find the piece of information you want, and then stop looking. But that's not the whole answer. This is another scenario of where the policy buddy really excels. If you would just scroll up, Julia, you can see that we gave it a scenario and it is considering all of these different pieces of legislation. It's taking into account this is what you need to think about, all of them together. It's not making a decision, it's set out in a way that you can look at and digest and consider holistically what are all of the things that need to be going on for me, what are all of the things I need to be thinking about. Similarly, if you looked at only one piece of legislation or one document and you found what you thought the answer was, you're missing out on the other 7 things that are there. And so this gives us a brilliant opportunity to continue learning, for us as practitioners to keep taking those messages, to keep building on our practice knowledge. Julia, can we do one more? So one of the really interesting uses for this technology isn't so much around educating me as a practitioner, but is helping me to help other people. So, Julia, would you ask Policy Buddy to write a 1-minute guide for a teenage boy, helping them to explain what will happen at their looked after review? Can you also ask it to include who will be there, what topics might be discussed, and where they can get support? But before you press enter, I also want you to ask it to write the answer in English first and in Spanish straight after. Now, traditionally, if you're working with a family, we have a whole bunch of meetings and processes and scenarios and situations that people might find difficult, that it might take us a long time to prepare something for them. And what this tool does is it looks at our policy and procedure. It looks at what do we say should happen in a review, and is then able to prepare a really quick guide. Similarly, if you're working with a family where English isn't their first language, you have the ability to translate it into their first language. Anybody that is working in a local language, and the costs that we faced of translation services. So being able to say, write it in English first, write it in Spanish straight after, gives you the confidence that it is translating the right thing. You know what that says. You might not speak Spanish, but if you scroll up, we'll see the English version, and you can be confident that actually that's going to be there or thereabouts. This gives you the ability to answer people's questions, provide people reassurance, and to give them the confidence that whatever it is that's happening, there is the ability to get support in their first language almost immediately. You can take that text and send it via a WhatsApp or a text message directly to somebody, traditionally, what would you do? Would you prepare a 1-minute guide for everybody? Would you hope that your service has got some standardized templates around what to expect at a review? I suspect different authorities do different things, but this gives you that ability really personally to say, prepare me this, prepare me a guide aimed at a parent, prepare me a guide aimed at a teenager or at a 10-year-old. And these are the things that I want you to cover. If that child's worried about who's coming, make sure you put it in the prompt. Make sure you tell it what it is that you want it to do. So being able to do that and being confident in the answer, because it's really personal, because it's really specific. I suppose one of the other points is not all of your social workers, English won't be all of your social workers' first languages either. So they have the ability to communicate with it in their first language and to get those really specific answers. All of this means that, yes, you're going to be saving people's time, but you're also going to be building people's trust in you as a service. You're also going to be helping people be less worried about the things that are happening. And you're going to be able to tailor the information you provide to families to meet their specific requirements. And as I said, you can access this on your computer. You can also access it on your mobile phone. You can type your questions, you can speak your questions, and whatever your preferred communication style, it will adapt itself to meet your needs. So if we say, for example, we gave it a really clear instruction there, I was just going to ask it, Julia, can you provide me more detail about the review? This draft was too brief. So it's given me actually what I told it, but I'm now saying, no, that's not enough. I don't have to worry about it getting annoyed with me. I just say to it, can you give me some more info? Can you provide me a bit more? I could equally say, can you provide me more information about a specific part? And it will take the prompt and it'll do the work. How many student social workers or newly qualified social workers would have the confidence to go back to somebody 4 or 5 times to get the perfect answer? Probably not many. Having access to a tool like this gives you that ability. So where we've got to is that we've got almost 50 practitioners testing it across all of the services that we have. We have been able to ask it questions about, can you look at all of our policies and procedures and tell us what we need to update? We've been able to give it really specific scenarios and say, can you help me with the considerations that I've got here? What are the key pieces of legislation or information that I need to make the best decision I can? And interestingly, one of the teams that we spent some time with was the team that support families and practitioners when children die. And we gave it a scenario of a child has died at school, and can you tell us what the key responsibilities of the school are? I get that's not the nicest scenario to give, but it is a scenario that people often ask. It's not a situation that schools face very often. And so when they do, they often need to give us a call for advice and guidance. I can see that Julie is asking the question, so I'm hoping that it will provide the same answer as it provided to us. The first line of its response was, I'm sorry that this has happened, that you're dealing with a child that's died. And I was taken aback by it, because just having the ability to understand that this is not a positive question, it's not a positive situation, was actually reassuring for me. And I was able to, spend some time with the team whilst they thought through the situations. So as you can see, it takes it, it brings you the answer really quickly. You can have the confidence that these are all of the pieces of information that you need because they're referenced at the end. So, as I said, last week we spent some time with our practitioners looking at how was it going, what were the barriers to adopting it, what were the opportunities that people had been able to use and to explore, and what were the kind of general themes of people's views on using the policy buddy. I probably should say that actually from start to finish, from us providing Engine with the documents that we wanted it to look at, the turnaround was really quick to having a product that we were able to use and test. I think it took less than 2 weeks. And that's not typical in the AI space. Anybody that's involved in transformation, usually there is much longer leading time to the creation of something like this. But what it meant was we could very quickly take it to practitioners. Anybody that's reading closely on the screen, you'll see that it says it's a test product hosted by Leading AI, and we're talking about Engine. Engine and Leading AI are the same organization who've just gone through a rebrand. So if you see Leading AI, it does mean Engine. They are the same organization. So the feedback, some of the feedback from people was, I've used it, but then I've forgotten that I've got access to it. So I've not been using it regularly. Some of the feedback from people was around, I've given it some questions and it's me back slightly different answers every time, which I think is probably a topic that we'll save and I'll discuss with Kevin and Kieran, maybe in the panel discussion. But for some people, there's got to be a level of trust in adopting technology. And I think some people had said, I've asked it this question, it gave me this answer. I've asked it another question and it's given me a similar answer, but written differently, worded differently. The overwhelming feedback from people is, wow, can we have this for everything? The majority of managers that are testing it have said, can we have one that deals with the HR process, that talks to me about the induction process? People have seen the benefit that it's got for them and their practice and have kind of immediately thought, yes, this is useful for social work, but there are other areas of my life that would benefit from this technology. And I guess that's an opportunity and a challenge for all of us in terms of transformation and getting people to a point where they adopt technology, is making sure we get maximum use out of the things that we've got. The quote that really stands out to me, there's two actually. The first quote that stood out to me was somebody who is not, they would probably describe themselves as not being keen on technology, and they dropped me a message to say, I never thought I would say this, but I absolutely love it. The second quote that stands out to me was somebody that couldn't make our meeting, and they sent me an email and said, I'm really sorry that I can't make it, but I really want to provide some feedback. This tool has changed my working life and I can't imagine practice without it. Now, for a team manager to say that the policy buddy has changed their working life within the space of 6 weeks is remarkable. What other technology would we say has changed our working life? In fact, what other thing would we say has changed our working life in the space of 6 weeks? So to have feedback from people that is positive, to have feedback from people saying this has actually changed how I work is totally brilliant. One of the other pieces of feedback, and one of the things that we've seen through testing, is that there is a change process that's got to happen. For 20 years, we've all been using Google. We're all used to, if we want a piece of information from the Children Act, typing into Google Children Act, hitting return, and then scrolling through the results. Using something like the Policy Buddy, the relationship is more personal. So if I wanted to know what the key principles of the Children Act were, rather than typing principles of Children Act, I should be typing something along the lines of, can you tell me the key principles of the Children Act, and can you tell me the sections of the act that they relate to, or something along those lines, giving it really clear instructions, but in a personal way, the type of question that you might ask of your colleague or your manager. And for some people, that change has been difficult. For some people, there has been a process that they've got to go through to say this isn't the same as Googling an answer. This is actually a conversation. And I can ask a question and I don't have to be satisfied with the answer. What I can do is I can ask follow-up questions. I can say, okay, I'm interested in what parts of the Children Act relate to the family court. I can ask what parts of the Children Act relate to children's services. I can say, how does that impact on my practice? I can give it scenarios and situations and ask it to confirm the things that I'm thinking about. So the disabled children workshop that I attended, really complicated situation, loads of things going on. And I was able to ask it to break it down, identify what is this young person's needs, what are the pieces of legislation that I need to be thinking about when I'm deciding. And we also tried to trip it up. So I said to it, should I be providing services under the Chronically Sick and Disabled Persons Act, or should I be providing services under the Children Act? And it wouldn't give me the answer. It said these are you could realistically provide services under both. These are the key things that you need to consider when you're making your decision. And these are the factors that involve each. So when we talk about AI and the things that we don't want it to do, here in North Yorkshire, all of our work around AI is about using it to assist social work practice, not to replace social work practice. Even trying to make a decision, and it's saying, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to tell you the key factors. I'm here to tell you the legislation. You and your team need to sit together and think together about what that means for you in practice. Is really reassuring for us. What that means is that we're not going to hand over control wholeheartedly to technology, but we are going to harness technology for the things that it's good at. And the things that it's good at is reading much more than we're able to read. It's good at being able to digest huge amounts of information, way more than we've got the time to. If you looked at that reference list, I can't remember which question it was, but there was a reference list that was eight documents long. Would social workers have the time to sit and read those 8 documents? Would they have the time to go and find those 8 documents? Probably not. But by using the Policy Buddy, you do have the ability to get the knowledge from those 8 documents. So where have we got to now? We've got to a point where we've tested it. We love it. We have some challenges around making sure that everybody has it and can use it and remembers to use it and embeds it within their practice. but we're only 6 weeks in. We're 6 weeks in and we've got practitioners saying this has changed how I do my job, it's changed my working life, changed their feeling about the tools that they've got at their disposal to help their team do their job. So the future challenge for us is, where do we take this? What we need to do is we need to roll it out to the workforce, and that brings its own challenges. We need to take it from 50 people to 900 people and get all of those people using it and have a way of measuring all of those different successes. This isn't just about saving time. It's not just about saving money. It's not even just about helping us to make more informed decisions. It's also about helping people feel better about the tools that we give them when they're at work. It's about empowering people to know and learn and be curious and to ask questions about their practice and about the things that they're thinking about. It's a tool that will help our staff, but also a tool that will help the children, young people, and families that we work with, because we can make more informed decisions, we can make quicker decisions, and we can give people the confidence that even if their particular query is really niche, even if I've never been asked it before in my entire career, I've got a way of asking that question. So that brings me to the end of talking to you all about how much I love the Policy Buddy and how much we've enjoyed testing the Policy Buddy. I think we've got an opportunity now to have a bit of a panel discussion and to answer some questions.
That's right. Thank you, Johnny. Yes. So now it's over to you, really. You've heard quite a lot from us today, particularly from Johnny, which was great. Thank you for that. But over to you. Ask us any questions. You can ask questions to Johnny about, again, a bit more detail about the experience that they've had in North Yorkshire and the tools they've had. You can ask myself and Kieran if you want to know a bit more about sort of wider applications or possibilities with AI. We're keen to hear from you. So there is the Q&A element within this webinar. Hopefully you can see that. You can post your questions in there. We also asked ahead of this for people to send in any questions if they wanted to. And so we've got a couple of those as well. So we can use those to start us off while you're thinking about what questions you might ask. And one of the questions was, how does this sort of application or tool fit within the sort of ecosystem or technological ecosystem within a local authority? I think I'll start with that one, but Johnny and Kieran, interested to hear your views on this as well. So every local authority's got a case management system, right? But I don't think we can expect the case management system to do everything for everyone. DFE recently asked us to do some work looking at what makes a good case management system, and the answer was 150 plus different answers to that, because each local authority will have their own different view. And so actually what I see is, or what I envision is, you'll have lots of different applications that can work together and support social workers in doing the work that they do. You can't expect liquid logic, and maybe they will do, but they can't develop everything that all local authorities will always need. And so just as you've got apps on your smartphone and you're used to using different apps for different things, I can see that these sorts of tools will play the same sort of role. But Johnny or Kieran, I don't know what you think.
I guess so Kevin, when you talk about tech ecosystems, I think about the disparity between my personal life, which very much does have a tech ecosystem. I have, smart devices at home. I've got a smartphone. I've got, a computer. I've got TVs and devices that I can use and control. And I think about my work tech ecosystem. And I think that social workers are deprived of many of the tools that other professions and other organizations give to their practitioners. And it's one of the reasons I absolutely love the work that I do, because my job is to try and bring some of that to the workforce. But we've almost moved from having physical filing cabinets to now having digital filing cabinets, and anybody that uses case management systems, or anybody that's heard me talk about it, will know that there's frustrations there. There were frustrations in 2011 when Eileen Munro reviewed child protection. There were frustrations in the independent review in 2022 by Josh McAllister. What this tool does is it breaks some of those difficulties. Now, anybody that's on the call will know that accessing your policies and procedures is generally not a particularly easy task. There will be a link somewhere. It might be on your intranet. It might be a useful link attached to your case management system, or it might be that somebody's got a stored and saved document. What this does is negates the need to do that. If you need the answer to your question, it's there. There's a way, I can't show you it right now, but there's a way of pinning the policy buddy next to your case management system. So your window effectively has the case management system and the policy buddy right at the side of it. So you can just tap away at the question as and when it comes to your mind. This is a new way of thinking about adding a very different tool to social workers' toolboxes, and I think it's a really welcome addition.
Thank you, Johnny. Kieran, is there anything you want to add?
I won't labour it too much from a technical perspective. If anyone is interested in that sort of side of things, the tool, as you have probably seen, it deploys on a web browser. So effectively anywhere you want to put that URL is where you can store it, have it. So you can either give that to people individually, or you can put it on the intranet, or indeed wherever you wish to. It's authenticated. Authentication follows the user's own authentication within the organization. So people from outside of your organization cannot access it unless we set that up as a specific thing. And in terms of integration with other systems, the nice thing about these at the moment is they sit sort of on top of anything else. So it doesn't require you to kind of get deep into any kind of big system integration. As we've heard for this example, it's really a matter of finding the data, the documents in this case, that you want it to know about, and putting them into a library that it can access. That's kind of as simple as that. You can do that with any data, in fact, provided you can get the data from the system that you want to work with, then put it into a library. That's the sort of it's the lowest risk version, because it means the AI cannot write back to the actual system, which for now we would advocate not doing until you're really confident in its abilities. We don't want it to be updating or overwriting, master records. So in terms of kind of the technical side of things, it's it kind of plug and play really. You can put it on top of whatever you want to.
Thank you. And then one of the key points from that actually is, it's only as good as the data that goes in. What's quite interesting is when you put lots of policies in, whether you can find contradictions or gaps in them as well. It could be useful to help you with that. Right, we've got quite a few questions coming in now, so I'm going to jump to those that are coming into the session. Got one from Richard that says, what might be the unintended consequences? So, for example, Johnny, you sort of said, it means that you don't have to go and speak to your colleague or your manager, but sometimes they're a positive interaction, not just, yes, it can take up time, but there could be unintended consequences here around this. Someone gave an example of, it's really shows you out, we've got sat navs now, so we don't need to reread maps. We don't need to use our brains to figure out how to get from A to B and so on. And is that actually necessarily a bad thing? Because if you haven't got the sat nav, then how do you find your way around?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we've been considering around adopting new technologies and using technologies, especially thinking about AI, is making sure that we keep one eye on what are the potential unintended consequences and what are the things that we might lose. Now, yes, you might lose the value of having that kind of by chance conversation, asking that question, potentially, asking a manager and saying, I'm not sure, and role modeling these are the steps I'm going to do to find the answer. I guess I'm reassured a little bit by the fact that you don't need to do those steps anymore to find the answer, because that's what the policy buddy does. But also there's some other opportunities. So how do you know that a particular person is struggling with a topic? I think that's a risk. If a student is struggling to grasp a particular area of your service, how do you know that if they've got access to this policy buddy that can, that they can ask 100 times? But equally, it brings about opportunities. So one of the things that the team at Engine are talking to us about at the moment is, can you identify from the questions people are asking the policy buddy, can you identify key themes? And can you use those themes then as a team or as a group or as a service to think about together? So if you've got 15 questions related to private fostering, you might want to dedicate some time as a team to look at private fostering together in a group supervision or as part of a team away day. So I think it's really important to keep in mind what are the things that you risk losing, but also then to try and identify what are the mitigations that you can put in place as an organisation to those.
Yeah, and I just briefly, on my perspective, you're probably less interested in my perspective, Richard, on this point, but we see this, we worry about this across all of our tools, and other clients obviously are concerned about this unintended consequences. What are you losing? What are you giving up? I think there's some in teaching and education. So to go back to that, it brings you right back to the question that's been around forever, which is what should education be for, and what is assessment all about, and what are teachers there to do? Which is I find fascinating. So there is a genuine question about what is the value that the humans bring, the people bring, and make sure that you can do more of that because you can take away more of the admin from them. So we're sort of super proud of we think our tools in most cases, in all cases, enable people to spend more time doing the things that you would want, I think, the people to be doing. And you mentioned also something about facilitating transients and turnovers of social workers. One of the things in teaching, again, and I know this is a huge challenge in your sector, is the turnover of teachers. And two things in there. We think, one, if you can take away a bunch of the admin, certainly in teaching, that is what people say is the reason they leave. Mainly, obviously there's other things. And secondly, if you do have new starters, well, you can get them up to speed pretty quickly. You wouldn't, you need to make sure they're put through proper training as well. But this can be a fantastic assistant or buddy to them as you go through that. So my view is, but I absolutely think we need to keep an eye on this all throughout all of AI. What is it taking away, and how much of that is what we want it to take away? I'm with you entirely on the worry. It's a good thing to keep in mind.
And one of the things we're saying when we're looking at these tools and deploying them is that there's a change management aspect to it, right? So it's not just here's a tool, off you go. We want to understand how people are using the tool, understand what these risks are, and identify them because it is new, and there will be things that we don't foresee coming up that we just need to spot as quickly as we can if they're negative, and see if we need to do anything about them to mitigate them, but also spot the opportunities, as Johnny said, right? If you've got that data that says, oh, there seems to be a bit of gap in knowledge across our staff around this area, absolutely, you could focus on that in the next in an upcoming meeting, or put on training for it for a wider audience, because they may not know about it either. So we're always mindful of that. There's some questions in here about ethics and bias as well. I mean, one of the things about this tool is it is trained only on the information that is fed into it. So we ring fence. We say we Engine and North Yorkshire, they ring fence the information, but put only policies and procedures to documents that were relevant, and the assistant is programmed and primed to only give factual answers. So when Johnny sort of said, "Help me make a decision," for example, it didn't, because the assistant, the buddy, was told not to, that it shouldn't, and so it couldn't. Emily asked if questions can be spoken. So Johnny mentioned that in his presentation. If you've on a phone in particular, if you've got speech to text functionality on the phone, then you can, when you click on that little prompt section, enter it in. But at the moment, I don't think it can give spoken answers. Is that right, Kieran?
I think only via the phone's text to speech. So it can do that, which is what Johnny's using, I think, to enter answers as well.
Okay, thank you. There's a question around sort of benefits broadly, but cost-benefit analysis in particular. I don't know whether or not you've started measuring those sorts of things, Ronnie. You've talked obviously about some of the benefits you've observed from talking to staff. Have you I once upon a time you did some calculations about time savings around another tool that we'd worked on. Have you done anything like that for this?
We've not, and we've deliberately not looked at pounds and pennies. I think probably what I'd say, the first thing is, I know that when talking about adopting technology, especially in local authority services where nobody has enough money, that can be the first question. I guess what I'd say is that the policy buddy is so cheap to use that it's almost a no-brainer that you would adopt it and roll it out and use it with your staff. Now, we had 50 testers and we wanted to really focus on testing the functionality, testing out the AI, putting it through its paces, and to see whether it had benefits for practice. We know the areas that people will save time. How do you put pounds and pennies on people making more informed decisions or not having to go back to a family? Some of that's really tricky to calculate, and you almost need to, in your business case, evidence, yes, you're going to save time in people not asking each other for some of those answers to questions, etc. But what about retention? Because your social workers are not going to move to another local authority where they don't have access to a policy buddy. How do you put a pounds and penny figure on the fact that people feel better about their work, they feel more empowered because you've given them the tools? Some of that's really tricky, but it also becomes really easy because we're not talking about a piece of technology that is going to cost the local authority £100,000. It is almost a no-brainer for people to think, actually, this will, without any doubt, be cost effective for us.
Okay, thank you. Jane made an interesting point just pop up about it's not just retention, but also maybe like sick leave as well, stress related type stuff that can reduce people's productivity as well. Thank you. This next question is probably for Johnny, though Kieran might want to chip in a bit as well. Do you have an AI policy in place at North Yorkshire? What do you say to staff who want to use these sorts of tools? How do you ensure that they are using the tools responsibly? But also, how do you, if you're buying these tools from companies like Engine, how do you ensure that they are responsible, ethical, and not using the data inappropriately?
Yeah. Okay. So there's quite a few bits in there. I guess the first part, and one of the tricky parts when we start talking about should we let practitioners use AI, I would say there are a whole raft of practitioners that are already using AI, but they're using the AI that's accessible to them. So by giving people the tools and a roadmap to, we want to use AI in an ethically informed way, then I think you minimize some of the risk of somebody else loading ChatGPT and saying, I've got this situation and scenario, and I want you to tell me the legislation. As Kieran said in the intro, the problem with ChatGPT or the kind of the large language models that look at everything is it might tell you the legislation from Japan and Australia and the United States and a little bit of the UK. So there's more risks there. And I think it's important that we recognize that people are and do use AI now. What we've been developing and we use is an AI ethics impact assessment. So we developed that alongside the other project that we've been working on using AI, and we use that to make sure that we're keeping ourselves in check, making sure that we're not getting carried away with the shiny toys. Wouldn't this be great? I think our kind of motto is, can we use AI for the things that it should do, not for the things that it could do, because it could do a lot of different things. One of the questions that people often ask is, how do you make sure AI is not making any decisions? And I guess that's really tricky when you're asking it a question and expecting an answer. The answer is it is making a decision. It's making a decision about what it brings back. but it's making a decision based on the guidelines that you've given it. How do you make sure that the social worker ultimately makes the decision about what they're going to do with that information? Well, you do that certainly in relation to the policy buddy. You do that by giving them all of the information. And remember, I talked to you all about, as humans, we find the first thing and then generally stop looking. The tool gives you all of the information. It is definitely deciding what to show you, but it also then gives you the references, so you can go and check its homework. If it's told you something, press on the link, go and read the actual document. It makes that really easy for you. So I think the idea of how do you stop it from making decisions? You don't. How do you guide it to make the right decisions? And how do you make sure that your staff are maintaining control of the decisions that they should be maintaining control of, is kind of the question that we need to keep asking and keep making sure that we're thinking about.
Thank you. Kieran, I wonder if you could just address maybe the question around data protection.
So I don't know which specific question, but
I can answer it if you want, but I thought it might be good for you.
Okay.
I mean, so the way that you've got it set up, I know, is it's in on Azure database that is on your side, because that's just how it was set up very quickly. But it can be hosted by the local authority if they've got their own Azure database, and that would mean that any prompts, any questions that are asked are only visible to the local authority. But you put in place a data sharing agreement, which means that you declare that you aren't going to use any information for any other purposes than to maintain the application and so on, so that North Yorkshire are covered legally by that sort of commitment.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, we obviously, this is an area that we are very concerned about. Everything that we do in Engine is about private and secure solutions. That's what we want to do. That's why using ChatGPT for things is great, to get it just to produce content. If you want written things, it's perfectly brilliant. But if you're putting anything into it, suddenly that can become part of ChatGPT's training, and it's not secure. Also, by the way, anything you're putting into it, even securely, even if you've ticked, well, you can't do it securely, but you can tick the option in the large language models to not share your data, it is still probably being processed in the US, or certainly outside the UK on other servers. So it's something you need to keep in mind with public services data. Ours do not. They process everything in the UK in a secure environment inside your Microsoft Azure, as Kevin points out. So the data doesn't leave, which is really important to us. And then, we have obviously data protocols internally about what we can and can't see anyway. What we can do, we can't see the users. We can see an ID. So just to get into a bit of techie detail, but we can see for any prompt, the ID, the unique ID of the person. Only you and the organization can put that information back together to find out who that was. So we think that's good, because if there is an incident that you do need to go through somebody's log, if you did want to, you can, but we cannot. So there's a whole bunch of kind of protections that we build around that as well.
Thank you.
It's probably worth just adding, Kevin, if it's all right, is so the all of the documents that the policy buddy looks at are all publicly accessible pieces of information. It's national legislation, and it's our policies and procedures as published on our website and available to everybody to read. One of the other things that we've done is made sure that the splash, the home screen, and all of our induction training makes it really clear to anybody using the policy buddy that they shouldn't be putting their own personal or other people's personal and identifiable information in. But actually, when you think about the use cases, there's no reason to, because you don't need to identify somebody to get assistance with a person's situation or scenario. You don't need to identify somebody to talk to the policy buddy about the practice considerations that you're thinking about. And so obviously, if you were going to use this type of technology to really specifically ask a question about a child or a child's situation and give it access to their information, you certainly wouldn't be able to deploy it within a couple of weeks, and you would really need to be robust in relation to the security of their information.
Yeah, thank you. Right, a couple of linked questions now. One for Johnny. Did you have to update your policies and your guidance documents a huge amount once you put it in? Did you find all sorts of issues there? And then a related question about how do we maintain that data? So how do you keep it up to date? If you made a change to a policy, what would that process be? That might be more for Kieran than Johnny. Technical question.
Yeah, well, I guess probably one of the benefits that I didn't really cover when I was talking to you about it is that having the policy buddy has highlighted to us the spaces in our policies and procedures that we do need to pay some attention to. And any large organization with large numbers of policies and procedures will be similar. You know, there will be older policies and new policies and potentially some contradictory information in the two. But you can ask the policy buddy. You can say, go and read all the policies and tell me what contradicts with what. Tell me, I think I was asking it questions relating to the new Working Together to Safeguard Children, and said, take this as your guiding document, read everything else and tell me what I need to focus on and pay attention to update. Not only could it tell me the documents that I needed to look at, it could tell me the actual sentences that I needed to go in and pay some attention to. Now, thinking about, imagine if somebody went into your local authority and said, you need to update all of your policies and procedures so that they're in line with Working Together to Safeguard Children 2023. That's a huge piece of work. Technology like this can really help you see the key bits that you need to pay attention to. And where 7 weeks in, we've not done a huge amount in relation to changing our documents just yet, but that's going to be a process that we do because of the policy buddy, because of the things that it's been able to highlight for us.
Yeah, and we see so it's really interesting. Our first client was a college back last November, was our very first version of this kind of model, and it's brilliant and does great answers. It turns out their policies are really good and well written, and when you talk to the college about it, they say, "Oh, well, that's good to know," because we sit in these policy committee meetings. So they've obviously put some effort into that. Interestingly, we have had clients where their policies are less well written. Let's say these tend not to be public services. So a charity we're working with has less well written policies, and it does, you'll see it quite quickly when the answers you get can be either a bit ambiguous or can change. And that's often when you go and look at the source, you'll find why it's happening and then adjust accordingly. So it definitely is something that you will start to see. We run a testing period once we're, Johnny's helpfully running a really big and longer test than usual for us, which is fantastic. Typically, we'll have a kind of week or two with a small team in a client, giving it, as Johnny was saying, trying to break it, which they invariably do. They give it their hardest, most difficult things to deal with first, which is good. And that tends to flush out a bulk of the challenges where the policies themselves need to be updated. And in terms of updating, as in the next year, when you need to adjust it and put a new policy in or revised, it's super simple. You load it in and re-index. So I could get more technical about what actually goes on, but basically that's what you do as a user, and it sorts it out and works out where that policy is relevant to everything else. But it is very good in, as Johnny says, you can paste in a policy and say, is it relevant? Is it contradictory, or where's it referenced elsewhere? It will do that for you. There's some other things people use them for, which is really interesting. I don't think we've really covered. You can get it to write emails for you, or communications, or media talking points should you need to. It can do all of that for you. It obviously can do that in any language. People use it to lower the reading age sometimes. So to your point about the teenage boy that you're going to brief, but if you wanted something that potentially you could print and hand to them, you can have that lowered. And indeed, if you have some fun with it, you can ask it to explain quite complicated things. I once had it explain parental leave as if to a 5-year-old. And one of our policies, and it's quite fun to read what it comes out with, but it does it, and it does a really, really good job of it, and instantly, as you've seen. And then Julia, I don't know, was working on recently with a client on a version where you use it to create a Q&A quiz to test training, to test staff knowledge of policies. So any of your policies, you can instantly get it to do that for. and give you a quiz that you could take into a team session or something and have a bit of fun with, or indeed make it serious and have people actually respond to it. So we are fascinated with where people take this, what's next with it. There is more automation you can do. I can see somebody's asked a question about releasing it to the general public. I think there's some really big questions and ethical questions about that, but in time potentially. But in even being able to automate it more, we can email into it instead of the web page. You can have an email access to it so that it effectively replies to your email. That takes you into a whole new world of what you might do with it. But so it's we're always fascinated with where these things can go and what they can do.
Kevin, can I just add? So on Kieran's point about the additional things it can do, one of the things that I wanted to mention was we have specific North Yorkshire related processes for things, and most local authorities will have for authorising things, for agreeing to things, and by telling the policy body to draft you whatever that is, a request for this meeting or this group decision making forum, it can go and read the policy, understand what are the key things that need to be in that document, and can produce you the first draft for you to then fill out with the details, saving time. But also, if your policy is clear about what that decision making forum needs and does, the policy buddy can give you that without you needing to send a draft, have it sent back. Actually, you need to include X, Y, and Z, and all the time improving your experience of preparing information for those decision-making forums or processes.
Thank you. Right, a few more questions. One is from Steve asking about can AI trawl through and highlight potential personal details? So in theory, it can. Obviously, that would mean you putting in that information that has those personal details. So don't be using anything public like ChatGPT for that sort of thing. We have been looking and thinking about, for example, using these sorts of tools for redaction. Johnny and I have talked long and hard about can you help with redacting children's files, taking out confidential information that shouldn't be shared with a child, and so on. So it's definitely an area that we're interested in because it could save a lot of time for all the work that happens right now when subject action requests and file requests are made by care leavers. So another question here, Safia, I'm not quite sure what you mean. So you mentioned the dual screen option with the case management system and the AI buddy. So does using predictive tech mean that it could start co-working with social workers, prompting or suggesting future actions or other areas to consider?
Okay, so when I talk about the dual window function, what I mean is your case management system will be on the main part, and almost the sidebar can have the policy buddy open. There is no relationship between the policy buddy and the case management system, but what it means for the practitioner is you can be getting on with your day job, but when a question pops up, you don't need to then go and find the link for the policy buddy. You don't then need to go and open another browser to do it. It's just there, so you can click into it and ask a question. I think this situation might be private fostering. These are the reasons that I think it might be private fostering. Can you tell me whether that's right or not? And it can go and then look at the stuff, answer the question. If it comes back and says yes, it is, you can then follow it up and say, what are the things that I need to do now? And it can go away, find the information, but there's no relationship between the policy buddy and the case management system or its contents.
Yeah. One of the things I have seen this week, though, thanks to Kieran and Julia, actually, so Copilot, that's the Microsoft product, it's embedded in their office systems now. I was watching a video about it yesterday where it's in your Outlook, and there's an option now to say prioritize my inbox, and you can click on that button and it can go through emails and say these are the actions that I think you need to worry about right now based on the email exchanges that you've been having, for example, and which ones you need to worry about first because of how long it might take to respond or deal with this sort of stuff. So there are tools that the likes of Microsoft are looking to build in this space, but it's not with this policy buddy. that's not where we're heading or looking at the moment. We're trying to create a very ring-fenced, curated tool that does a very specific thing, so that it does it very well. We've got, as I said, Microsoft are supporters of the incubator, and they do a lot of good work with us, and they helped Johnny with the previous project around the knowledge mining before. But Copilot is, one of its limitations is it looks at all the information that you've got. Can't tell the difference between what's good and what's bad. What's a draft, what's the final version, and so on. So it struggles. And the value in on what engine are building here is actually you can specify what the good information is, and it will base it off of that. I think looking through all the Q&A, that is most, if not all, of the questions that have been asked.
I was going to ask Kieran, I made the point and said that we should come back to it during this conversation about why might it be that two people can ask a really similar question and get two consistent but slightly different answers.
Yeah, and there's a couple of reasons that we see in this. So firstly is when people ask the same question, they're not actually always asking the same question, although they might think they are. So the best example of this was with a client that asked about an annual leave in a policies assistant and internal staff policies, staff handbook and various other things. And she'd written the words. She sent us the screenshots, and she said it's added something else to this one, and I don't like it. So they were trying to break it and being skeptics, which is good. And anyway, what she had written first time was, what happens if I have exhausted my annual leave? And she then said, I've written the same question again. She wrote, what happens if I exhaust my annual leave? That very minor difference between past tense and potential future makes it answers you very accurately. With what it did was actually give her another option that was only available if you haven't already spent all your annual leave. There was something she could have done at that point. So there's that thing firstly and that's where, as you pointed out, Johnny, getting better at prompting, understanding how we ask the questions and search is something we all need to work on, frankly, because AI deals better when you give it more information and precise information, although you can be very colloquial as well. The policies assistant that we have in Morley College, in fact, you can say, my wife is pregnant, and it works out that you are probably wanting the paternity policy. Although, to the point of bias, other people have pointed out that that might not be the truth anymore, might not be the case. You might not be a paternity policy, or indeed you might not be a man. And therefore, how do you work that through? That's in their policies to deal with, actually, is the real answer. It's not actually the AI being biased, it's the policies making those assumptions. In the case with one of your feedback, I'm reading here, is the question that was asked is, I've got it up here in our chat history. One of the things we should make clear is you get a chat history, so you can go back to any of the conversations you had, and you can continue that conversation after the time if you want to, or indeed just see what you've asked and what was written later. So that it's useful as a record for you. That's individual and sits only within your own account in it. So. But the question that was asked is, at what age do care leavers qualify for the single room rate allowance in the housing element of universal credit? And it answered, I think there was two different answers based on whether you're 22 or 25. And I've pushed it harder to say, is there contradictory information in this? It said, no, there's not. And it seems to be the difference between the national legislation and your local legislation. I think that it is, we call it crosstalk when it starts to try and helpfully piece together two things which actually are possibly not saying the same thing. So that's those sort of specific areas. It gives a good answer, and it actually quite often will explain its thinking as to why, and you can force it to do that. How have you got this? And it will tell you more about how it reached its answer. But those, that area is something that certainly in what you feed it, the policies, the data, as I think Kevin pointed out, they're only as good as the data that you put into them in the first place, really. So give yourself the testing time to check some of those more difficult things is the big message. Some of these are very easily overcome. Firstly, the best recommendation is to adjust the policy. Sometimes that's a bit more painful, particularly if it's national legislation, in which case you can add literally a paragraph of text and load it into the index and tell it, what the answer should be, or indeed how to deal with those kind of difficult challenges and what you want it to do in that case. So you can force it to say, this is one way I'm finding ambiguity, things like that. Long-winded answer, but there you are. That's what we're experiencing with it.
That scenario is really important as well, though, because anybody that works in a leaving care team will know that it's not just the children and young people's national legislation that applies to those teams. There are other pieces. So, so the housing legislation, for example, was part of the answer to that question. And I guess one of the challenges is working out how much is right to put in, how much should you leave out, but equally making sure that your practitioners have a healthy level of skepticism. Ask it to tell you how it's found the information. Go and read the reference documents that it said. Don't just take the answer as being gospel.
Yeah, and that's important with all AI, particularly at the moment while we're all learning. And what we see is it doesn't hallucinate, but yeah, it does do a bit of crosstalk occasionally, which is a similar challenge. I should quickly say I'm conscious that people are sort of dropping off one by one. I know we've been here quite a while. We've got other tools that do other things. We do a policies. You've heard me talk about the Morley College and other customers that we work with on their internal policies. We've got some data crunching tools which are really interesting that can start to look into databases and do the work for you. So for colleges, there's a thing they have to do every year called the self-assessment review, which they have to do in readiness for Ofsted, but also for their own sort of quality reviews, really. That involves tutors, or program managers, as they call them, the kind of heads of department, crunching through a lot of data spreadsheets, really, mainly, and working out what they're good at, bad at, what they need to therefore do. The AI tools can do that in seconds. And I would strongly argue that I don't really want our teachers to be spending their days staring in Excel spreadsheets, looking at data things and working out where patterns are, when something can do that instantly for them. And now they can spend their time on the why is that happening and what can we do about that as the quality of the service in general. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff, and I think Julia has a QR code. I think we're going to email you afterwards if you'd like, with a follow-up piece on our website where you can see some other events, webinars that we can go. There's a QR code being put in the chat. You can find out a bit more about some of the other things we do if that's of interest to you. But we're very keen to see this Johnny's policy buddy, the Johnny buddy, used much more widely. So if you're interested in your authority of doing something similar, then please get in touch with Coram or with Johnny. Obviously with us, we'd be really keen to hear, but you might want to talk to others first. Up to you, but we're delighted to work with you on building something and trying something as well. So that's my sales pitch, and I'll do no more.
Okay. One thing to add on this is there's a bit of a question around, the underlying AI intelligence engine maintained and governed. For those of you who understand sort of IT infrastructure, this is a platform as a service. So it's a bit like, I guess, Office 365 even. It's that sort of thing. You're providing the platform, the AI platform. Local authority, in this case North York, so the organisation is overlaying that with its own information, own data. And that together they combine to create this service, this buddy. Last comment in here was someone says, we can use plain English. Can we do stuff as a poem? It can do stuff as song lyrics. I would wager, I don't know if you heard, Kamala Harris, when Taylor Swift gave her endorsement for her presidential bid, she gave a speech and she wove in Taylor Swift song titles into that. Yeah. I would wager they used AI to help them with that. And if they didn't, they should have done, because it would have saved them a lot of time. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up. We've had an hour and a half here, so thank you all for your time. I hope you found this interesting. So if you've got any further questions, any follow-up, please do get in touch with us. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions and to speak to you further about this. But we hope you have had a good afternoon with us. Have a good evening, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.